Hey there, I'm Kala, and this is the story of how my own family betrayed me. My parents set up a trust fund just for my brother, while I was the one paying their bills, while I was the one keeping them afloat, making sacrifices, and putting my own life on hold. And when I found out, they told me I didn't need it, because I was independent. But that was just the beginning. The lies ran deeper than I ever imagined. My own family drained my inheritance, stole from me, and when I fought back, they tried to destroy me. They sabotaged my job, locked me out of my own finances, and even turned the world against me with their lies. I spent my whole life trying to earn their love. But what if I was never meant to have it? What if I was only ever meant to be their safety net, their personal ATM? The smell of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air as I stepped into my parents' home, the familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet. It had been months since my last visit, and yet everything looked exactly the same. The framed family photos lining the hallway, the antique clock ticking steadily in the living room, unchanging, like time had stood still in this house. Kala, sweetheart, you finally made it. My mother's voice floated from the kitchen, warm yet laced with something I couldn't quite place. I set my overnight bag near the stairs before making my way toward her. She was stirring a pot of soup, her delicate fingers moving methodically. "You've been so busy. We were starting to think you'd forgotten about us," she said with a soft smile, but her eyes flickered with something else, something more expectant. "I've just had a lot going on with work," I replied, knowing full well that wasn't the answer she wanted. She wasn't interested in my deadlines, my stress, or my exhaustion. What she really wanted was to remind me that family should come first. My father sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a pile of documents, barely looking up as I walked in. He grunted a half-hearted greeting, his focus elsewhere. That had always been our dynamic. My mother fretted over me, and my father treated my presence as a mild convenience. "You're just in time," she said. "Dinner will be ready soon. Why don't you go say hi to your father?" I forced a smile and crossed the room, sitting across from him. His glasses slid down his nose as he skimmed through paperwork, occasionally muttering to himself. "Need some help?" I offered, reaching for a few of the loose papers. He exhaled sharply, as if I had disturbed something sacred, but after a pause, he handed me a folder. "Just sort these out." Separate anything labeled financials. It was nothing new. For years, I had been the responsible one, the daughter who helped manage their bills, fixed things around the house, sent money when they needed it. I had never asked for anything in return. As I sorted through the papers, my fingers brushed against a folder labeled Trust Fund, Silas Whitmore. I froze. Frowning, I pulled it out and flipped it open. The first page was a legal document outlining the terms of a trust fund. My brother's name was on every page. A trust fund. For Silas. I scanned the details. $750,000. Secured for him. Untouchable by anyone else. My name wasn't mentioned, not once. The air in the room seemed to thicken, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. "What's this?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. My father barely glanced up. "Put that back, Kala." "That's none of your concern." "None of my concern?" I repeated, gripping the folder tighter. "There's a $750,000 trust fund in Silas's name, and I wasn't even supposed to know?" His jaw tensed. "It's not what you think." My mother, who had been setting the table, suddenly stilled. She turned toward us, her expression carefully neutral. "Kala, sweetheart, let's not make a big deal out of this." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not a big deal? You set up a trust fund for Silas, but nothing for me?" Mother sighed, placing a gentle hand on my arm as if that would soften the blow. "You don't need it. You're successful, independent. Silas, he struggles." I stared at her, feeling something inside me crack. I worked for everything I have. I've been the one keeping this family afloat, and yet, somehow, I'm the one who doesn't deserve security? My father rubbed his temple, clearly irritated. "This isn't about fairness, Kala. It's about what's best for the family." "Best for the family?" The words tasted bitter in my mouth. So, what am I then? Just a backup plan? A paycheck you can call when you need something? Neither of them answered, and in that silence, the truth settled deep into my bones. It had never mattered how much I sacrificed, how many times I had put them first. I had always been the afterthought. I placed the folder on the table, exhaling slowly. I get it now, I said, my voice eerily calm. You made your choice. And now, I'm making mine. I turned on my heel, my mother calling after me, but I didn't stop. Calla, wait. Please, we can talk about this. I grabbed my bag from the stairs and yanked open the front door. You always said family comes first, I said without looking back. But it turns out I was never part of that family to begin with. And then I walked out, slamming the door behind me. The night air was cold against my skin as I got into my car. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, my breath coming out in uneven bursts. They had made their decision. Now it was time for me to make mine. I ignored my parents' calls for the first time in my life, but I knew this was only the beginning. By the time I reached my apartment, exhaustion had settled into my bones. I tossed my bag onto the couch and exhaled, rubbing my temples as I kicked off my shoes. The silence of my home was both a relief and a heavy reminder of the battle I had just walked away from. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to check to know who it was. Still, curiosity won, and I pulled it out. 20 missed calls, 15 from my mother, 5 from my father. The messages weren't much better. Mom. Calla, let's talk. Dad. You're being unreasonable. Come back so we can discuss this like adults. Mom. You're overreacting. You don't understand everything. Dad. Silas needs this. You don't. I clenched my jaw, flipping my phone screen down on the counter. Of course, they would spin it this way. Of course, they would treat my feelings as an overreaction rather than the years of built-up resentment they had carefully ignored. I had been walking on eggshells around them for so long, doing whatever was necessary to keep the peace. And now, the moment I chose myself over their demands, they were scrambling to regain control. For the first time in my life, I didn't respond. I let their calls ring. I let their texts sit unanswered. I knew it wouldn't be that easy, but for tonight, I just needed space to breathe. Morning came too soon, and with it, the gnawing weight of reality. At work, I tried to focus, but my thoughts drifted back to my phone, which had been vibrating off and on all morning. During my lunch break, I finally gave in. Another string of messages waited for me. Mom. I don't understand why you're doing this to us. Dad. We're your parents. We did everything for you. Mom. Calla, please. Don't let your anger ruin this family. I gritted my teeth. They weren't apologizing. They weren't acknowledging what they had done. Instead, they were making me the problem, turning my sacrifices into expectations, twisting the narrative so I looked like the ungrateful one. I typed out a response. I gave you everything. And it was never enough. Then I deleted it. They wouldn't listen. They never had. Shoving my phone into my desk drawer, I swallowed the lump in my throat and turned my attention back to my computer. If I let them get to me now, they'd win. That evening, Jordan called. So, how long before they show up at your doorstep? I groaned, pressing the speaker button as I curled up on my couch. Don't even joke about that. I'm not joking, she said, her voice serious. You know them, Calla. They're not going to stop. I ran a hand through my hair. I don't know what to do. I don't want to cut them off completely, but you have to, she interrupted. At least for now. You can't let them keep pulling you back in. Silence stretched between us, and then she sighed. If they really loved you, they wouldn't make you feel guilty for choosing yourself, she said gently. My throat tightened. I know, I whispered. Then don't give in. If you answer them now, they win. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'll try. But we both knew my parents weren't the kind of people to let go that easily. I had just started to relax when the knock came. Loud, insistent. I froze, my stomach twisting. Another knock, followed by my mother's voice. Calla, sweetheart, open the door. My pulse pounded in my ears. They wouldn't. They couldn't have driven all the way to Seattle just because I hadn't answered my phone. But as I crept toward the peephole and saw my mother standing there, her coat wrapped tightly around her, her face twisted with worry, I realized, yes, they absolutely would. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but I knew her. She wouldn't leave until I let her in. Taking a steadying breath, I unlocked the door. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, her lips trembling. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, stepping forward as if to hug me. I held up a hand. "No." She stopped, blinking. "Mom, what are you doing here?" My voice was sharper than I intended. She clutched her purse, glancing around the hallway as if she were afraid someone would hear. "Calla, please, don't do this. We're family." I exhaled slowly. "Number you did this." Her expression crumbled. "I know you're upset, but—" "I'm not upset. I'm done." Her eyes filled with fresh tears. "Silas, he needs this more than you. You have everything. I clenched my fists. "And that's my fault?" She flinched. "You had every opportunity to help him," I said, my voice steady now. "But instead, you chose to punish me for being responsible." She shook her head quickly. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Mom?" She inhaled sharply, looking at me as if I was the one breaking her heart. And then, her voice dropped to a whisper. "If you walk away from us, you'll regret it." I went cold. That wasn't a plea, it was a warning. I stared at her for a long moment, then stepped back and gripped the edge of the door. "Good night, Mom." And before she could say another word, I shut the door in her face. I stood there for a moment, my heart hammering. Then, for the first time in my life, I locked the door on my mother. When my father called the next morning, I knew this wasn't over. I stared at the screen, his name glowing under the early morning light, filtering through my bedroom window. My instinct was to ignore it. After last night, after shutting the door on my mother, I had no energy left for another fight. But I also knew my father. He wasn't the type to leave things unresolved. If I ignored him, he'd find another way to get to me. With a deep breath, I picked up. "I think it's time we talk, Calla," he said, skipping any pleasantries. His tone was clipped, controlled. I sat up, rubbing the exhaustion from my face. "Talk about what, exactly?" "This situation you've created," he replied, as if I had forced all of this upon them. "It's getting out of hand. We need to put an end to this childish behavior." I clenched my jaw. Childish behavior? Standing up for myself after years of being treated like an afterthought was childish? "You're not going to guilt-trip me into fixing this for you," I said, keeping my voice level. He exhaled, clearly frustrated. "I'm asking you to meet me, face to face, so we can settle this. That's not unreasonable, is it?" I hesitated. I knew this wouldn't be an honest conversation. It would be an ambush, just like every other time they had tried to wear me down. But curiosity pulled at me. Maybe a part of me still wanted answers. Maybe I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. "Fine," I said, "but we meet on my terms." Silence. Then, begrudgingly, "Where?" I chose a neutral spot, a cafe downtown, somewhere public, where they couldn't cause a scene, and where I could walk away. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, hoping to get my bearings before they showed up. But when I stepped inside, my stomach twisted. They were already there, and they weren't alone. Silas sat beside my father, leaning back in his chair, looking completely at ease. My mother, seated across from them, had a carefully composed expression, like she had rehearsed how this would go. So this wasn't a conversation, it was an intervention. I swallowed the irritation bubbling up inside me and approached. The moment I sat down, my father wasted no time. "We need to end this nonsense," he said, folding his hands on the table. "You're making a mistake, Calla." I raised an eyebrow. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're the ones who lied to me. Silas let out a scoff. Seriously, Calla? You're really making this a big deal? I turned to him. I'm sorry, did you just say this isn't a big deal? You, who was gifted a trust fund worth more than most people will see in their lifetime? He rolled his eyes. It's just money. You'll be fine without it. I forced a laugh. Easy to say when you're the one benefiting. My father cut in, voice firm. Enough! This is getting us nowhere. I exhaled sharply, pressing my palms against the cool surface of the table. Then tell me, Dad, what exactly do you want from me? My mother leaned forward, her voice soft. We want our family back. A bitter taste filled my mouth. Your family? I was never actually part of it, was I? She flinched, but my father didn't miss a beat. Calla, let's be realistic. Silas needs us. You don't. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. There it was, the confirmation of what I had always known, but never let myself believe. I sat back, fingers curling into my lap. So that's what this is. You made a choice, and it wasn't me. You're making it sound worse than it is, my mother murmured, shaking her head. I stared at her. Am I? Silence. Then my father exhaled, rubbing his temple. We're done playing games, Calla. This is your decision to make. You either stay with your family and support us, or you walk away for good. I blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. If you want to keep acting like you're not part of this family, then don't expect to come back. Something inside me cracked. It wasn't anger, not shock either. It was something deeper. Finality. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and set it down carefully before meeting his gaze. If that's how you see it, I said quietly, then I choose myself. My mother let out a shaky breath. My father's expression darkened. Silas smirked, as if he had won, but I felt nothing but clarity. I stood, grabbing my bag. If you walk away, Calla, my father said, his voice low, warning, don't expect to come back. I nodded, adjusting the strap on my shoulder. I wasn't planning to. As I turned to leave, Silas let out a dry laugh. You'll regret this. I looked over my shoulder, met his smug gaze, and let the words roll off my tongue with certainty. Number I won't. I thought I had won, but I underestimated just how far they would go. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine in hand, staring out the window at the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more walking on eggshells. No more bending over backward for people who never saw me as enough. Jordan sat across from me, her feet tucked beneath her as she sipped her own wine. She studied me for a moment, then smirked. You look weirdly peaceful for someone who just set their family on fire. I chuckled. It feels good. Better than I thought it would. She tilted her head, swirling her drink. You sure it's over? I exhaled, sinking deeper into the couch. They made their choice. I made mine. What else is there to say? Jordan set her glass down, her expression turning serious. Calla, they're not going to accept this. You know that, right? I waved a hand dismissively. Let them try. She didn't look convinced. Just be careful. I know you think this is done, but people like them, they don't let go without a fight. I rolled my eyes. Jordan, I appreciate the concern, but what are they going to do? Cut me out of their will twice? She sighed, muttering something under her breath, but didn't press the issue. I should have listened to her. The next morning, I was knee-deep in emails at work when my phone rang. I barely glanced at the screen before answering. Calla Whitmore. Good morning, Ms. Whitmore, a professional voice responded. This is Rachel from First National Bank. We're just calling to confirm your recent loan application. I blinked, frowning. I'm sorry, what? Your loan application, she repeated. The request was submitted yesterday, with your brother, Silas Whitmore, listed as a co-signer. We just need a few final verifications before proceeding. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. I didn't apply for a loan, I said, forcing my voice to remain even. There was a pause on the other end. I see. Well, the application was submitted under your name. Would you like to dispute this? I pushed back from my desk, my heart pounding. Yes! Immediately! Understood. We'll freeze the application for now and launch an internal review. I barely registered her parting words before hanging up. My hands trembled as I stared at my phone, the weight of what had just happened settling in. Silas. He had used my name, my credit, my trust. And for what? I clenched my jaw and hit call before I could talk myself out of it. Silas answered on the third ring, sounding annoyingly casual. Hey, sis. You applied for a loan in my name? My voice came out sharp, shaking with barely contained fury. There was a pause. Then, instead of guilt, I heard amusement. Oh, that. Yeah, don't freak out. It's just a short-term thing. I gripped my phone tighter. A short-term thing? Are you out of your mind? He exhaled dramatically. Relax, Calla. You've got great credit. It's not like it'll hurt you. That's not the point, I snapped. You committed fraud. Oh, come on. It's not fraud if we're family, he said, like I was the one being unreasonable. I nearly laughed at the sheer audacity. Cancel it, right now. He hummed as if considering it, then chuckled. You're acting like this is a big deal. It is a big deal, Silas. Do you have any idea what you've done? If this goes through, I'll be responsible for your debt. Do you really think I'm just going to let that happen? His voice lost its lightness. You're overreacting. I gritted my teeth. I swear to God, if you don't fix this, I will take legal action. Silence. Then his voice turned smug again. Go ahead. Mom and Dad will back me. My stomach dropped. Of course they were involved. I ended the call before I could say something I couldn't take back. But I wasn't done. My mother answered after 2 rings, her voice calm, too composed. Calla, I was wondering when you'd call. Don't act like you don't know why. My voice was ice. What the hell did you and Silas just try to pull? She sighed, as if I was being difficult. Sweetheart, Silas needed help, and we knew you wouldn't give it to him. I gripped the phone tighter. So you thought stealing my identity was the next best option? Don't be dramatic, she said smoothly. It's just a loan, and you have so much more than he does. I felt my stomach churn. You think this is about money? Of course it is, my father's voice cut in. I hadn't even realized he was on speaker. You've made it very clear where your priorities are. We simply did what was necessary. I let out a bitter laugh. Necessary? You forced my name onto a loan application. We forced nothing, my father said, voice cold. You forced our hand, Calla. And there it was. They truly, genuinely believed I owed them, that my entire existence revolved around their needs, their choices. My mother sighed again, as if I was the one being irrational. You're making this harder than it has to be. Something in me snapped. You know what? My voice was steady, deadly calm. I'm done talking to you. Calla. I hung up. They had made their move. Now it was my turn. I sat in my office for a long moment, my hands curled into fists. Then I picked up my phone and dialed. A firm, professional voice answered. Miriam Carter's office. I need to block my brother from ever using my name again, I said, my voice like steel. What do I need to do? I thought blocking him financially would be enough. I was wrong. Sitting in Miriam Carter's law office, I felt the weight of the last 48 hours pressing down on me. The sleek, modern decor of her downtown Seattle firm should have been calming, but instead, it made my reality all the more surreal. I was here, sitting across from a lawyer, because my own family had made me their target. Miriam flipped through the bank records I had sent her, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, she didn't seem the least bit surprised. Families pull stunts like this more often than you think, she said, leaning back in her chair. It's not uncommon for financial abuse to come from the people closest to us. I clenched my hands together. I don't understand how they thought I wouldn't find out. She gave a small, knowing smile. Because they assumed you wouldn't fight back. Well, they were wrong. I sat up straighter. I want full financial protection. No more chances. I don't want Silas to have access to anything tied to my name. Miriam nodded. We can file paperwork immediately to revoke his co-signing privileges and put fraud alerts on all your accounts. That'll prevent any further unauthorized transactions. Good, I said. And what about my parents? Her expression tightened. That's trickier. If they're acting under Silas's name or convincing banks that they have your permission, they might still find loopholes. I can have everything flagged, but they'll escalate. I finished for her. She sighed, tapping her pen against the desk. Be prepared for them to retaliate. I wasn't just prepared. I was ready. The call from Silas came that evening. I was curled up on my couch, flipping through TV channels aimlessly, when my phone rang. His name flashed across the screen, and for a split second, I debated letting it go to voicemail. But I didn't. I wanted to hear just how desperate he had become. I pressed answer. Are you serious, Calla? His voice was already raised. You're ruining my life over nothing. I rolled my eyes. Nothing? You stole my information to take out a loan, Silas. That's not nothing. Oh, come on, he groaned. You have no idea what you've just done. I crossed my legs, forcing my tone to stay even. Actually, I do. I protected myself. Maybe you should try doing the same. There was silence, and then a bitter laugh. You think this is over? I know it is, I said. And then, before he could get another word in, I hung up. For the first time, I felt a rush of satisfaction. He was furious, which meant I had taken something from him. His control over me. I should have known better than to think that was the end of it. The next day at work, I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone vibrated. One notification, then another, and another. I discreetly glanced down at my screen, my stomach tightening. Missed call, Mom. Missed call, Dad. Missed call, Mom. Before I could even process that, a message popped up. Mom. Calla, we're here. We need to talk. Here? Dread pooled in my stomach. I muttered a quick excuse to my colleagues and slipped out of the meeting room, heading straight for the lobby. And there they were. My mother sat on one of the pristine couches, clutching her purse, her eyes already watery as if she had been rehearsing tears before I arrived. My father stood beside her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. I approached, pulse pounding. What the hell are you doing here? Lenora blinked up at me, eyes filled with practiced sadness. We just want to talk. At my workplace? I hissed, glancing around. A few employees were already staring. She sniffled. You won't answer our calls, Calla. What were we supposed to do? Maybe take the hint. Reginald stepped forward, his face void of warmth. You embarrassed your own family with this stunt. Do you even realize the damage you're causing? I scoffed. You mean the damage you caused by trying to use me as your personal ATM? His jaw tensed. That's not how this works. You don't get to cut us off just because you're upset. I don't? I asked, my voice cold. Because that's exactly what I just did. My mother's lip trembled. Calla, please, we're family. You're pushing us away. You pushed me away first, I said, and you made it clear where I stood. Her face twisted with emotion, but I wasn't sure if it was genuine heartbreak or just another manipulation tactic. Mom, Dad, leave, I said through clenched teeth. For a moment, they didn't move. Then, my father exhaled sharply and turned on his heel. My mother hesitated, as if hoping I would change my mind. But when I didn't, she rose and followed him. I let out a shaky breath. But just as they reached the glass doors, my father paused. Without turning back, he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, You'll regret this, Calla. I went cold. It wasn't a plea, it was a threat. I didn't go back to my meeting. I went straight to my office, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. Miriam answered after one ring. Calla? What's my next step if they escalate? I asked, my voice steady, but my hands clenched into fists. Because I knew this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. I thought my father's words were just empty threats, until I realized he wasn't bluffing. Sitting on my couch, I traced the rim of my wineglass with my finger, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. Across from me, Jordan watched with narrowed eyes, her own drink untouched. So, they showed up at your job? She asked, voice carefully controlled. I nodded, rubbing at my temple. Unannounced, in the middle of the day, like they had every right to be there. Jordan let out a low whistle. They're getting desperate, I scoffed. Desperate? They threatened me. My father told me I'd regret cutting them off. She leaned forward. And that's exactly why this is a good thing. I shot her a look. Come again? Jordan shrugged. It means they're losing, Calla. People only lash out like this when they feel powerless. I wanted to believe that, but my father wasn't the type to accept defeat so easily. I took a slow sip of my drink and murmured, I hope you're right. Deep down, I knew she wasn't. The next day, I was at work, half buried in emails, when my phone lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. I ignored it at first, but when the same number called again minutes later, I sighed and picked up. Calla Whitmore speaking. Ms. Whitmore, this is Angela from First National Bank. We detected an attempted login to your online banking profile from an unrecognized device. We wanted to verify. Was this you? My stomach dropped. No, I said sharply, sitting up straighter. That wasn't me. There was a pause on the other end. Understood. We've temporarily locked your account for security purposes. Would you like to update your passwords now? I barely heard her. My pulse pounded in my ears. Someone had tried to get into my bank account, and I knew exactly who. I'll be down there in person, I said before hanging up. Grabbing my bag, I stormed out of the office. Sitting in my car, I clenched my phone so hard my knuckles ached. Without thinking, I called the one person I knew was behind this. My father answered on the second ring, his tone infuriatingly casual. Calla? Finally decided to call your old man? I didn't even try to contain my rage. Did you try to hack into my accounts? There was silence. Then a slow exhale. I was making sure you weren't making any foolish decisions, he said smoothly. I nearly screamed. Are you out of your mind? You had no right. You forced our hand, Calla, he said, voice calm, as if we were discussing the weather. If you won't help this family, don't be surprised when we find other ways. I was shaking now. This isn't helping. This is theft. Watch your tone, young lady, he snapped. We're your parents. We're just looking out for you. I gritted my teeth. I don't need you looking out for me. Stay out of my life. I hung up before he could respond. My whole body trembled with fury. This wasn't just control. This was war. And I wasn't about to let them win. Miriam's office was cold, sterile, and exactly where I needed to be. She barely looked surprised as I explained everything. Silas, the fraudulent loan, my father's latest stunt. I need to make sure they never touch anything of mine again, I said, voice tight. Miriam nodded. We'll file for a financial protection order immediately. That'll ensure they can't access, manipulate, or falsely claim anything in your name. I exhaled sharply. Good. And a restraining order? She folded her hands on the desk. That's trickier. The courts usually require a physical altercation or direct threats of violence, but we can build a case for harassment. I clenched my jaw. Do whatever it takes. She slid the paperwork across the desk. I didn't hesitate. I signed. This was it. I was officially severing them from my life. But just as I stood to leave, my phone buzzed. An email. I glanced down, and my blood ran cold. Subject, urgent HR meeting. I had a bad feeling about this. When I walked into the HR office, I realized exactly what my father had done. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel the tension in the room. The HR manager, a woman named Susan, sat stiffly behind her desk, avoiding direct eye contact as she gestured for me to take a seat. I had been through enough meetings in my career to recognize the signs. This wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. I forced myself to stay calm as I lowered into the chair. I got an email saying this was urgent. What's going on? Susan cleared her throat, glancing down at a printed document in front of her. Calla, we received a formal complaint about you. My stomach clenched. From who? She hesitated before sliding the paper across the desk. Your father. I stared at the document, my heart pounding as I read the words printed in neat, professional font. I'm reaching out of concern for my daughter, Calla Whitmore. She has been displaying erratic and unstable behavior in recent weeks. I fear she may be struggling mentally and could pose a risk to herself or others. As her father, I feel it is my duty to notify you before this escalates further. I gripped the edge of the chair, my nails digging into the fabric. Susan shifted uncomfortably. I know this is a personal matter, but given the nature of the complaint, we had to investigate. I forced a breath through my nose, working to keep my voice level. You understand this is a lie, right? She nodded, but still looked uneasy. We're not making any assumptions. But when a concern like this is raised, especially from a family member, we have to at least have a conversation. Of course. My father knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't trying to get me fired. He was trying to plant doubt, make me look unstable. If I lost my temper here, it would only work in his favor. I straightened my posture, smoothing my hands over my lap. I appreciate that you have to do your due diligence, but let me be clear. This is nothing more than an attempt to manipulate me. My father is retaliating because I recently cut off contact with him due to his financial and emotional abuse. Susan exhaled, nodding. That makes sense. And to be honest, we don't have any concerns about your performance here. I just needed to hear your side. I met her gaze. Then I assume we can dismiss this? She hesitated. We will, unless further issues arise. I clenched my teeth. Further issues, meaning my father had already planted the seed of doubt, meaning that if he tried something again, they might not be as quick to dismiss it. I pushed down the simmering rage and forced a tight smile. Thank you for letting me clear that up. The moment I stepped out of the HR office, I pulled out my phone and dialed. He picked up on the first ring. Calla? My father said smoothly, as if he had been expecting me. What the hell was that? I hissed, barely able to keep my voice steady. What was what? He replied, feigning innocence. Don't play games with me, Dad. You called my employer and tried to sabotage my job. He exhaled, like I was exhausting him. I was concerned about you, Calla, that's all. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the phone tighter. Concerned? You tried to paint me as unstable. He was silent for a beat. Then, with a casual tone that sent ice through my veins, he said, You've been making reckless choices. I was merely looking out for you. I let out a slow, measured breath. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him exactly what I thought of him. But I realized something in that moment. If I lashed out, I'd be giving him exactly what he wanted. So instead, I lowered my voice, keeping it steady and firm. This is your last warning, I said. Stay out of my life. I hung up before he could respond. And then, before I could second-guess myself, I called Miriam. She didn't even try to hide her anger when I told her what had happened. This is defamation, Calla, she said, her voice sharp. We can take legal action. I exhaled. What would that look like? We start with a cease and desist letter, she said. It's a formal legal warning. If he continues, we file a lawsuit for defamation and harassment. I nodded, already knowing my answer. Do it. She paused. You realize this will escalate things, right? I let out a bitter laugh. Miriam, it's already escalated, she sighed. I'll have the papers drafted by tomorrow. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was taking control, But the moment I left Miriam's office, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, my stomach twisting at the notification. Security alert. Unauthorized access attempt. I clicked the notification. Flagged login attempt. Your account was accessed by an unrecognized device. And then, at the bottom of the screen, the name of the person tied to the attempt. Lenora Whitmore. This time, it was my mother. I expected my father to escalate, but I never thought my mother would join him. Sitting at my desk, I felt a hollow weight settle in my chest as I stared at the security notification on my phone. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Account holder. Calla Whitmore. Flagged login attempt. Lenora Whitmore. My fingers hovered over the screen, my mind struggling to catch up with what I was seeing. My mother. I had braced myself for my father's retaliation, for his cold, calculated attempts to destroy my stability. But this was something else entirely. Before I could process the full impact, my desk phone rang. My personal banker's number flashed on the screen. I lifted the receiver with a tight grip. "This is Calla." "Ms. Whitmore," the bank representative said, his voice neutral but clipped. "We wanted to confirm an attempted modification on your account today. A request was made to update access permissions under the name Lenora Whitmore. Was this authorized?" I felt my stomach turn. "No." My voice came out sharp, unwavering. "Absolutely not." A brief pause. "Understood. We've flagged the attempt and locked any further changes pending your direct approval." I swallowed the rising lump in my throat. "Did she access anything?" "No funds were withdrawn," he reassured me. "But the request included adding a secondary user with full financial control." I nearly dropped the phone. She hadn't just tried to access my money, she had tried to take control of it. "Keep everything locked down," I said, my voice tight. "I'll be in touch if I need further action." The moment I hung up, I exhaled shakily and pressed my fingers to my temple. My father had declared war, and now my mother had chosen his side. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, my pulse thrumming in my ears. I had no choice. I had to call her. It rang twice before she answered. "Calla," she said softly, like she had been waiting for this call. I didn't waste time. "Tell me you didn't just try to access my bank account." A silence stretched between us, then a sigh. "Sweetheart, we just needed a little help." I closed my eyes. There it was. No denial, no hesitation, just quiet justification. I gritted my teeth. "You're stealing from me, Mom." "Stealing?" she repeated, her voice laced with hurt. "Is that what you think this is?" "What else would you call it?" I snapped. "You went behind my back. You used my name. You tried to take control of my money." Her voice softened into something pleading. "Calla, your father and we're struggling. We've supported you your entire life. Is it so much to ask that you help us now?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "You supported me?" "No, Mom. I supported you. I paid your bills. I covered your expenses. I did everything you ever asked of me, and it was never enough." "That's not fair," she whispered. "We're your parents. We deserve your help." "Deserve." The word sliced through me like a blade. I had done everything right. I had been the responsible one, the dependable one. And for what? To be treated like my success made me an obligation? I inhaled sharply. "That's not how this works." Before she could respond, another voice cut in. "You're being dramatic, Calla." My father. "Of course. Of course you're listening in," I muttered. "This has gone on long enough," he said, his voice infuriatingly measured. "You're making this harder than it has to be. You're going to regret this behavior." Something inside me snapped. "I'm going to regret it?" I repeated. "You tried to sabotage my job. You broke into my accounts. And now you have the nerve to act like I'm the problem?" My mother made a small noise, but I wasn't sure if it was a protest or just guilt. I clenched my jaw. "You don't get to manipulate me anymore. This is over. Don't call me again." And then, with shaking hands, I hung up. I didn't wait. I drove straight to Miriam's office. She took one look at me and sighed. What did they do now? I dropped into the chair across from her desk. They're still trying to access my finances. This time, it was my mother. Miriam's expression darkened. We're filing a financial restraining order. I exhaled, my body heavy with exhaustion. Will it be enough? It'll be a start, she said, already pulling up the necessary documents. They won't be able to legally interfere with your assets again. I nodded, barely hesitating as I signed the paperwork. A restraining order, against my own parents. A year ago, I would have never imagined it would come to this. But they had forced my hand. This was my line in the sand. I left Miriam's office feeling lighter. Not happy, not relieved, but lighter. Like I had finally taken one more piece of my life back. But then my phone buzzed. An email notification. From landlord's office. Subject. Notice. Your rent has been unpaid for 2 months. Immediate action required. My blood turned to ice. I knew I had paid my rent. I had autopay set up. There was no way. I clicked the message, scanning the details. My rent had been paid. But then, a few weeks ago, a cancellation request had been submitted. By someone using my name. My hands shook as I scrolled to the bottom. The request had been confirmed under a verified phone number. My mother's number. They hadn't just tried to take my money. They were trying to take my home. I thought I had control over my life, until I realized they were still pulling the strings. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, my phone still clutched in my hand. The email from my landlord glowed on the screen like a warning siren. Notice. Your rent has been unpaid for 2 months. Immediate action required. This had to be a mistake. I scrambled to log into my bank account, my fingers trembling. My rent was on autopay. I had set it up years ago to avoid exactly this kind of issue. There was no way I had missed 2 payments. But the moment I pulled up my transaction history, my stomach lurched. The payments were gone, not just delayed. Gone. 2 months of rent that should have been deducted had never even processed. My balance was untouched, like the payments had never been scheduled in the first place. It didn't make sense. Unless, a cold wave of realization crashed over me. I clicked on the billing settings, my pulse hammering. My landlord's account should have been listed as the recipient of my payments, but it wasn't. Instead, the payments had been rerouted to an entirely different account. A name flashed on the screen, one I knew too well, Lenora Whitmore. I felt the air leave my lungs. My own mother had intercepted my rent payments. She had deliberately sabotaged me. A slow, sickening rage burned in my chest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. They wanted to remind me that no matter how far I tried to run, they could still reach me. I stood abruptly, grabbing my keys. This ended today. The bank smelled like disinfectant and corporate efficiency, like a place where things were supposed to be orderly, logical, untouchable. Except my life had been anything but untouchable lately. A banker named Derek greeted me, his professional smile faltering slightly when I sat down across from him, jaw clenched. I need to understand something, I said, keeping my voice steady. 2 months ago, my autopay for rent was changed. I never authorized that. Can you tell me who did? He typed into his computer, his brows knitting together. A few moments passed before his eyes flickered, with something like concern. It looks like the request to update your billing details came from an authorized user, he said carefully. My stomach tightened. What authorized user? He turned the screen toward me. And there it was. The email address used for the request, Lenora Whitmore. I sat back in my chair, exhaling sharply. She hadn't just taken my money. She had wanted me to feel it. Derek cleared his throat. Would you like us to investigate this as fraudulent activity? I swallowed, my hands curling into fists. Yes, he nodded, already moving to flag the transactions. I'll make sure those funds are recovered, but given that this was a direct family member, I'd recommend putting additional security measures on your accounts to prevent future incidents. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, trust me, that's already in motion. I dialed my mother's number the moment I got back to my car. She answered on the first ring. "Calla, sweetheart," she said, her voice perfectly smooth, as if she hadn't just tried to screw me over. I gritted my teeth. "Fix it, now." A pause. Then, the fakest sigh I had ever heard. "Oh, darling, you're overreacting." I closed my eyes, inhaling sharply. "You stole from me, Mom." "We didn't steal anything," she said, like I was being ridiculous. "We were just reallocating resources. You have more than enough, Calla. We were only looking out for you." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "By rerouting my rent payments to yourself? Are you kidding me?" Her voice softened. "Calla, you have to understand. We were just trying to make sure you didn't do anything reckless." Reckless. That word made my blood boil. They didn't see me as independent. They didn't see me as a grown woman who had built a life of her own. To them, I was still something to be managed, controlled, owned. My father's voice cut in, and I felt my stomach twist. "You're making a mistake, Calla." I gripped my phone tighter. "No," I said, voice calm but seething. "The mistake was ever trusting you." And I hung up. For good. Miriam's office had become my war room. She barely raised an eyebrow when I stormed in. "What now?" "They hacked my rent payments," I said, dropping into the chair across from her. "It was my mother this time." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "All right, here's what we do." She pulled up a file on her screen, already prepping documents. "We're taking full legal action," she said. "We'll recover your funds, and we'll file fraud charges against both of them." I nodded, pulse steady. "And the protection order?" She nodded. "It's going through today." A silence stretched between us. Finally, she leaned forward, studying me carefully. "You know this is the last step, right?" she said. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I don't want to go back." She nodded once, then clicked submit. That was it. The ties were severed. For good. That night, as I sat in my apartment, I finally felt something close to peace. It wasn't over, not yet, but I had done everything I could to protect myself. I picked up my phone, checking for any new messages. And then, just as I was about to set it down, a notification popped up. New message from unknown number. My brows furrowed as I clicked it open. "Silas, you just made a huge mistake." My stomach twisted. For the first time, I realized this wasn't over. Not even close. I thought my parents were my biggest problem, until Silas made his move. The message from my brother sat on my screen like a lit fuse. "Silas, you just made a huge mistake." I stared at it, my heart pounding in my chest. Before I could even process what he meant, another message followed. "Silas, fix this, or you'll regret it." A cold shiver crawled up my spine. Silas had always been entitled, lazy, and manipulative. But this was something different. This was a threat. I tightened my grip on my phone. My parents had tried to ruin me through manipulation, through slow, insidious control. But Silas? He wasn't patient. He wasn't calculated like them. He was reckless. And that made him dangerous. I took a deep breath, willing my hands to stop shaking. Whatever he was planning, I needed to be ready. I wasn't about to let him win. The next morning, my phone buzzed with multiple notifications. I rubbed my eyes, barely awake, as I reached for it. But the moment I saw the messages, I bolted upright. Fraud alert. Unusual activity detected on your credit account. Fraud alert. Large purchase flagged for verification. Fraud alert. Suspicious transactions reported. My stomach flipped. I clicked into the alerts, my pulse skyrocketing as I scanned the transactions. $2,500. Designer clothing store, $1,800. Electronics purchase, $4,000. High-end jewelry charge after charge, all on my credit cards. I scrambled to call the bank, my fingers barely working as I punched in the number. After an agonizing wait, A representative finally answered. "This is Stephanie from Card Services. How can I help you today?" "There's fraud on my account," I said quickly. "I didn't make these purchases." She clicked away at her keyboard. "I see several flagged transactions. Let me verify something. These purchases were made online, linked to a shipping address on file." My breath caught. "Whose address?" A brief pause. Then, "A Mr. Silas Whitmore." I squeezed my eyes shut. Silas had done it. He hadn't just threatened me. He had acted. He had gone into full-on theft, using my credit cards to fund his pathetic lifestyle. I exhaled sharply. "Shut it all down. Every card. Freeze everything." "Yes, ma'am," Stephanie said quickly. "We'll initiate a fraud investigation." I wasn't done yet. I was going to make damn sure he never got away with this. Fury propelled me forward as I pulled into the parking lot outside Silas's apartment. I barely remembered the drive over. My vision had tunneled, my mind singularly focused. I stormed up the steps, fists clenched. The moment I reached his door, I pounded on it so hard my knuckles ached. It swung open a few moments later. Silas stood there, looking bored, like he had expected me. "Wow," he drawled, leaning against the frame. "Didn't think you'd show up so fast." I pushed past him, stepping inside. "What the hell did you do?" He didn't even flinch. He just smirked. "Consider it payback for what you did to Mom and Dad." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Payback? You stole from me." He shrugged. "You'll get the money back eventually." I stared at him in disbelief. The audacity. The entitlement. "You don't even feel bad, do you?" I whispered. His smirk faltered, just for a second. Then, he folded his arms. "Come on, Calla. You wouldn't actually do anything. You wouldn't turn in your own brother." For a brief moment, something inside me hesitated. But then I remembered everything. The manipulation, the stolen money, the way my parents had always shielded him, always let him get away with everything. And I realized, he truly believed I wouldn't follow through. That was his mistake. I took a slow, deliberate step back. "Watch me." I turned on my heel and walked out, ignoring the way his smugness evaporated into something closer to uncertainty. He was going to learn right now that I wasn't his safety net anymore. Miriam barely blinked when I told her what happened. "Are you ready to press charges?" she asked. I hesitated, just for a second. This was my brother. Then I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, the years of being the responsible one, the way my parents had bled me dry. And then, even after all of that, how Silas had still chosen to steal from me. I met Miriam's gaze. "Yes," she nodded. "Then let's make sure he never does this again." That night, as I sat in my apartment, my phone rang. I answered on the first ring. "This is Officer Daniels from the Seattle PD," a male voice said. "We've located the suspect, Ms. Whitmore. Would you like to proceed with the arrest?" I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Then, with steady resolve, I whispered, "Yes." I thought this was the end of it. But my parents had one last move to play. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I sat on the couch, my phone still clutched in my hand, after confirming Silas's arrest. The weight of what I had done settled deep in my chest, pressing down like a vice. He was in custody now. For the first time in my life, I had truly cut him off. There were no more second chances, no more allowances for him to manipulate and steal. And yet, guilt gnawed at me. "He's your brother," a small voice whispered in my head. Jordan, sitting across from me, must have read my expression because she leaned forward, her tone sharp but gentle. "Don't do that, Calla." I looked up, my throat tight. She gestured toward my phone. "You're sitting there feeling guilty, aren't you?" I swallowed hard. "He's still my brother." Jordan's eyes darkened. "Number he was your thief. And he would have kept stealing if you didn't stop him." I let out a shaky breath. "He did this to himself, Calla," she continued. "You just stopped him." I nodded, gripping my hands together. I knew she was right, but I also knew my parents wouldn't take this lightly. "This isn't over," I murmured. Jordan tilted her head. "No," she agreed, "but you've made your move. Let's see how they play theirs." The call came later that night. I had just crawled into bed, exhaustion settling deep into my bones, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but some part of me knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Mom. With a deep breath, I pressed accept. The moment I did, I heard it. The frantic, broken sobs. "Calla, please." My mother's voice came through the receiver, raw and desperate. "You can't do this to your brother." I squeezed my eyes shut. "I didn't do this." "He did," she sucked in a shaky breath. "But he's family." I exhaled slowly. "That word doesn't mean what you think it does." For a moment, all I could hear was her breathing. And then her tone shifted. Lower, steadier. "We'll make a deal," she murmured. "Drop the charges and we'll leave you alone forever." I almost laughed. Almost. It was a lie. I knew it. She knew it. Even if I let Silas go, they would never stop. There would always be another request, another expectation, another price for being their daughter. "No," I said, my voice calm, unwavering. "That's never going to happen." Silence. Then a quiet, bitter whisper. "You'll regret this." I hung up. I was done listening to threats disguised as love. I should have known my father would take things further. The next morning, I was in my office, trying to focus on work, when the receptionist called my extension. "Ms. Whitmore, your father is here to see you." The air in my lungs turned to stone. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of my desk. "Did you tell him I'm busy?" A pause. "I did, but he's refusing to leave." I exhaled sharply, my fingers pressing into my temples. There was no avoiding this. I walked out of my office and into the lobby. Reginald Whitmore stood near the entrance, arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. I squared my shoulders and met his gaze. "What are you doing here?" He didn't flinch. "We need to talk." I folded my arms. "We have nothing to talk about." His jaw tightened. "You are tearing this family apart." I laughed under my breath. "No, Dad. You did that years ago." His nostrils flared. "Drop the charges." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "Are you seriously demanding this in public? At my job?" "I'll do what I have to," he said flatly. "Drop them, and this all goes away." I clenched my fists. "And if I don't?" His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then we take this public," he said smoothly. "You think you've won? You haven't seen what we're capable of." A slow, nauseating dread spread through me. They weren't fighting to win. They just wanted to make sure I lost. I took a single step forward, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I'm not afraid of you," I whispered, "and you're never getting your claws in me again." His eyes darkened. I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. Miriam barely looked surprised when I told her what happened. "They're escalating," I said, my hands gripping the edge of her desk. "They won't stop." She nodded once. "Then it's time to file the restraining order." I exhaled slowly. A restraining order. Against my own parents. I knew this was coming. I knew it. And yet, the weight of it still made my chest ache. "Once we do this," Miriam said carefully, "there's no undoing it." I thought about the years of manipulation, the stolen money, the ultimatums, the way they had twisted family into a weapon against me. Then I thought about freedom. I nodded. "Do it." She typed up the final documents, turned the screen toward me, and I signed. The last thread connecting me to them, legally, emotionally, was severed. For good. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sinking into my couch. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. It was over. But then, my phone buzzed. A notification popped up on my screen. "News alert! A daughter's betrayal. How one woman had her own family arrested. My stomach dropped. I clicked the link, and there it was. A local journalist had run a story, one that painted me as the villain. My parents had taken this public. I thought I was done fighting them, but now the whole world knew. I woke up to the sharp buzz of my phone vibrating nonstop on my nightstand. Groggy, I reached for it, squinting against the harsh glow of the screen. Dozens of missed notifications flashed across my lock screen. Messages, missed calls, social media alerts. My stomach twisted. Before I could even process the chaos, my phone rang again. Jordan's name lit up. I swiped to answer, dread already curling around my spine. "Kala," she said, her voice tight. "You need to see this." I heard her typing, and a second later, my phone pinged with a new message. A link. I clicked it. And then my blood ran cold. Daughter cuts off, struggling family, gets brother arrested. That was the headline. My parents had gone to the press. The article was filled with their version of the story, a warped, twisted fabrication that made them sound like helpless victims and painted me as a heartless, ungrateful daughter. I scanned the paragraphs, my breath growing unsteady. "Kala turned her back on us when we needed her the most," my mother was quoted saying. "We did everything for her, and she repaid us by abandoning her own family." My father had added his own self-righteous twist. "It's devastating. We raised her to be better than this. She's not the daughter we knew anymore." And the worst part? They had even defended Silas. Her own brother was struggling, and instead of helping him, she had him arrested like a common criminal. My mother sobbed in the interview. "We just want our family back." A sick feeling churned in my stomach. They had weaponized my silence. And now, the world believed them. I scrolled down to the comment section, half dreading what I'd find, yet unable to look away. It was worse than I imagined. How could she do this to her own family? Blood is thicker than water. What kind of monster sends her own brother to jail? Disgusting. "Hope you're happy with yourself, Kala." Comment after comment, judgment after judgment. Complete strangers tearing into me as if they knew anything about what I had been through. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. "Jordan," I whispered, "this is bad." "People love to pick a villain," she said, "and your parents made sure it was you." I took a shaky breath, scrolling further. And then I saw something that made my heart sink. Familiar names, distant relatives, old family friends. I can't believe Kala turned out like this. After everything her parents did for her, this is how she repays them? It wasn't just strangers. It was people I had known, people I had once trusted, and they had turned against me without hesitation. I set my phone down, my hands trembling. My entire reputation was being shredded in real time. And the worst part? If I didn't fight back, this was the story people would believe. I walked into Miriam's office an hour later, the article still burning in my mind. She took one look at my face and exhaled sharply. I saw the article. I collapsed into the chair across from her. "They've destroyed me," I said flatly. She leaned forward. "Number." "They tried to destroy you," I scoffed. "What am I supposed to do? Just let them?" Miriam shook her head. "You have two options. We can file a defamation lawsuit against both your parents and the news outlet that ran this story." I blinked. "A lawsuit?" She nodded. "They've publicly defamed you. If we can prove they lied, you have a case." I swallowed hard. "And the second option?" "Go public," she said simply. I stiffened. "What?" "You tell your side of the story," Miriam said. "Take back control of the narrative. Right now, they own it. If you stay silent, their version of events is the only one people will ever hear." I hesitated. Fighting back publicly meant dragging everything out into the open. It meant reliving every ugly detail. But if I didn't, they won. I clenched my jaw, my decision solidifying. "If I say nothing," I murmured, "they win." Miriam nodded. "So what do you want to do?" I looked up, meeting her gaze. "Let's fight." That night, I sat in my apartment, my laptop open in front of me. Jordan was next to me, watching silently as I typed. My hands hovered over the keyboard, my heart pounding. I had stayed silent for so long. I had let them dictate the story, no more. I took a deep breath, and I began to write. I have stayed silent for too long. Here's the truth. I laid it all out. The years of being used, the financial abuse, the stolen money, the fraud, the emotional manipulation. I wrote about how I had supported them for years, only to be treated like I was nothing. How they had betrayed me over and over again. How Silas had stolen from me. How my parents had covered for him, defended him, tried to ruin me just to protect him. And finally, I wrote about why I had no choice but to walk away. When I finished, my hands were shaking. I turned to Jordan. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. I exhaled, my chest tight. "Yes." She didn't hesitate. She reached over, and she pressed post. The response was immediate. My notifications exploded. People were reading, reacting, commenting. Some were still against me, but others were starting to see the truth. If this is real, her parents are monsters. I had a family like this. Cutting them off was the best decision I ever made. People always assume the child is the problem. This proves otherwise. And then, just when I thought I could finally breathe, my phone buzzed again. A new message, from an unknown number. I clicked it open. "I believe you, but you don't know everything." I stared at the words, my pulse spiking. What the hell did that mean? Just when I thought I knew the whole truth, I realized there was more to the story. The message replayed in my mind as I stared at my phone screen. "I believe you, but you don't know everything." I didn't recognize the number. I should have ignored it, blocked it, moved on. But I didn't. Something about it lodged itself in my brain, refusing to let go. And when a second message came through, I knew I couldn't ignore it. "Calla, it's Evelyn, your aunt." Aunt Evelyn. I barely knew her. She was my father's older sister, the black sheep of the Whitmore family. My parents rarely spoke about her, and when they did, it was always with a dismissive shake of the head. She never knew how to keep her nose out of other people's business. She was always jealous. She caused too many problems. And yet, here she was, reaching out to me. My fingers hovered over the screen. I should have hesitated more. Instead, I typed back, "What do you mean?" A few seconds later, her reply came. "Meet me tomorrow, we need to talk." I exhaled sharply, gripping my phone tighter. Whatever she had to say, I had a feeling it would change everything. The next afternoon, I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe in downtown Seattle, gripping a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I didn't know what I was expecting, but when Evelyn finally walked in, I knew immediately that she wasn't here to waste my time. She was older than I remembered, her gray-streaked brown hair tied back, her sharp eyes scanning the room before landing on me. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight over, slid into the chair across from me, and set her purse down with a quiet thud. "Calla," she said, her voice smooth but firm. I swallowed. "Evelyn." She folded her hands on the table. "You know, I always knew something like this would happen. Just didn't think it would take this long." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She leaned forward. "Your parents. They didn't just lie to you, they stole from you." A cold chill ran down my spine. I forced out a shaky laugh. "I know that, Evelyn. They drained me for years." No," she interrupted. "Not just the money you gave them. Your money. Your inheritance." I blinked. "My inheritance? What are you talking about?" I asked slowly. Evelyn pulled out a small folder from her bag and slid it across the table. "Read." I hesitated. Then, with careful fingers, I flipped it open. Inside were copies of legal documents, old ones, a trust fund, a second trust fund, not the one for Silas, one that had been meant for me. My stomach turned. "I don't. What is this?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "Your grandfather set up a trust for you and Silas when you were kids, Both of you. Equal amounts. But by the time you turned 18, yours was already gone. I could barely breathe. How? I whispered. Evelyn exhaled. Your parents drained it, slowly over the years. By the time you were an adult, there was nothing left, and they never told you. Instead, they let you believe you were the one responsible for keeping them afloat. My hands clenched around the folder. It wasn't just manipulation. It wasn't just favoritism. They had robbed me blind. I shook my head, trying to process it. And Silas? Her jaw tightened. They protected his. Of course they did. I let out a hollow laugh, blinking back the sting in my eyes. Why are you telling me this now? Evelyn's lips pressed together. Because they made sure no one else would. And because I knew the moment you fought back, they'd do everything in their power to make you the villain. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. All these years. All the times I had been made to feel selfish for setting boundaries. All the moments I had questioned if I was the problem. It had all been built on a lie. A slow-burning rage settled into my chest. I closed the folder. Thank you for telling me. Evelyn nodded. What are you going to do? I met her gaze. I'm going to make them pay. The moment I walked into Miriam's office, she took one look at my face and sighed. What happened? I tossed the folder onto her desk. I want to sue them. All of them. She arched an eyebrow, flipping through the documents. A slow whistle left her lips. Well, this changes things. They stole from me, Miriam. My voice was tight, shaking. They let me believe I was helping them while they were living off my money the whole time. Miriam nodded. We have a case, a solid one. She looked up, eyes sharp. But this is a big move, Calla. It's one thing to cut ties. It's another to take them to court. I knew that. I didn't care. I want to take legal action, I said, my voice steady. All of it. Miriam studied me for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. Okay, let's do this. She reached for her phone. This is going to get ugly, she warned. I took a deep breath. It already is. And then, with a few calls and a signed affidavit. The lawsuit was in motion. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, my phone vibrated with a new email. I clicked it open. Notice of court filing. Whitmore versus Whitmore. It was official. I was suing my own parents. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. I stared at the court documents spread out in front of me, my signature scrawled at the bottom of the last page. My hands should have been shaking. My stomach should have been twisting itself into knots. But instead, I felt nothing but clarity. Miriam slid the papers into a folder, snapping it shut. It's done, she said, her voice even. The lawsuit is officially filed. Fraud, defamation, financial abuse, every crime they had committed against me, every secret they had buried, was now part of an official legal battle. I looked up, meeting Miriam's sharp gaze. This will go public, she warned. Are you ready for that? I exhaled slowly. They made this public first, I said. Now I'm taking the truth back. Miriam nodded. Then let's get to work. The first wave of backlash came hours later. My phone buzzed relentlessly, message after message flooding in. At first, I ignored it. I didn't need to read what I already knew was coming. But when my mother's name appeared on my screen, I hesitated. For a brief, stupid moment, I thought maybe, she was calling to finally admit the truth. I should have known better. Instead of answering, I let it go to voicemail. A second later, her text came through. You're destroying us. Drop this now or you'll regret it. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. So much for motherly love. Then came an email from my father. You will lose, Calla. We have nothing left to give you. The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. Even now, he refused to acknowledge what he had done. He thought this was about money. He didn't understand that this was about power, about control, and they were losing it. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against my desk. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one panicking. They were. But my parents weren't the only ones reacting. The internet had plenty to say too. Social media exploded within hours of the lawsuit going public. Some comments were brutal. She's suing her own parents? What kind of person does that? Entitled brat? They raised her and she repays them with a lawsuit? Blood is thicker than water. She'll regret this one day. But then, there were the others. Good for her. Family doesn't mean free labor. This happens more than people realize. Just because someone's family doesn't mean they have a right to your life. I had parents like this. Cutting them off was the best thing I ever did. I let out a slow breath, my grip on my phone tightening. Jordan, sitting across from me, frowned as she read the comments over my shoulder. You don't need to read this garbage, Calla. I sighed. I shook my head. I knew this would happen. I knew people would pick sides. Jordan nodded. Yeah, but the people who matter? They already know the truth. I gave her a small smile. She was right. For every person who called me selfish, there was another who saw the reality of what I had been through. And that was enough. 2 days later, Miriam called me with the news. I picked up on the first ring. We have a court date, she said. 2 weeks from today. I exhaled. Then it's happening, I murmured. It is, she confirmed. The final countdown had begun. No more threats. No more manipulation. In 2 weeks, everything would be laid bare. My parents would finally have to face the consequences of what they had done. And I would be there, standing tall. That night, as I sat in my apartment, sipping on a glass of wine, another email popped up on my screen. At first, I thought it was more hate mail, but when I clicked it open, my breath caught. From Jonathan Hale. Subject: Information regarding the Whitmore case. I frowned. Who the hell is Jonathan Hale? I skimmed the email, my eyes widening with every word. Ms. Whitmore, I was the financial advisor who worked with your parents for several years. I have information that might help your case. My heartbeat stuttered. I reread the email. Once. Twice. Then I grabbed my phone and called Miriam. We just got our first witness. I thought I knew everything, but this new information changed the game. Sitting in Miriam's office, I stared at the pile of documents in front of me. Richard Hayes, the former financial advisor, sat across from me, his hands folded neatly, his expression unreadable. This is everything? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Every bank statement, every transfer, every shady offshore account your parents funneled money into. They siphoned money from your trust fund over the years and used it to maintain their lifestyle. I exhaled sharply. It was worse than I had imagined. Miriam, sitting beside me, flipped through the pages, her eyes narrowing. This is more than enough to prove intentional fraud, she said. They knew exactly what they were doing. Richard sighed. They always did. I tried to warn them that misusing those funds could have consequences, but they didn't care. They assumed you'd never find out. Well, they were wrong. I clenched my fists. My parents had spent years making me feel like I owed them, that I was selfish for pulling away, that I was cruel for not funding their endless demands, and the whole time, they were the ones stealing from me. I swallowed back the rising fury and looked at Miriam. This changes everything, I said. We're going to win. She gave me a small smile. We were always going to win, Calla. But now, we're going to bury them. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high. I had spent so much of my life feeling like I was on the losing end of my parents' manipulation, like no matter what I did, I would always be trapped under their thumb. Not today. Today, I was taking my life back. I stepped into the courtroom and saw them. My mother sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, her lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. My father, ever the strategist, sat straight-backed, his expression calm. But there was tension in his shoulders, the kind of tension that told me he knew the walls were closing in. And Silas looked miserable. Good. Miriam nudged me toward our seats, and I forced myself to take a deep breath as the judge entered. The proceedings began. My father went first. "We did what we had to do," he said smoothly. "Calla always had more than enough. We simply managed things in a way that best supported our family." I scoffed under my breath. But Miriam wasn't about to let him spin his lies unchecked. She stood and laid out the bank records, the fraudulent transfers, the offshore accounts. The judge's eyes darkened as she skimmed the evidence. Then, Richard Hayes took the stand. "I worked with the Whitmores for several years," he said, "and I can confirm that they deliberately drained Calla's trust fund. They hid transactions, lied on financial statements, and ensured she had no idea where the money was going." My mother looked away, staring at the floor. My father's jaw clenched. "And Silas!" Silas finally realized there was no escape from this. The courtroom was silent as the judge turned to my parents. "You have anything to say for yourselves?" Reginald, my ever-proud father, held his chin high. "We were simply looking out for our son." The judge exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Looking out for one child does not justify stealing from another." And then, the ruling came down. I barely heard the words. I was too busy watching my parents' faces as reality sank in. They had lost. The judge ruled in my favor. They were ordered to repay the money they had stolen, their accounts would be audited, and they faced financial penalties for fraud. Silas would have a separate hearing for his role in the theft and identity fraud. It was over. The years of being manipulated, gaslit, controlled. They were finally over. I stood, my knees weak, my heart pounding in my chest. My parents didn't look at me as they shuffled out of the courtroom, but as I walked past them, my mother turned her head slightly and whispered, "You may have won, but you've lost your family forever." I paused. Then I smiled. That was never a family to begin with, and I walked away. Finally, I was free. This wasn't the ending I expected, but it was the one I needed. A week had passed since the trial, but the weight of it still lingered. I sat on my balcony, a cup of coffee warming my hands, the cool morning air filling my lungs. The city stretched out before me, indifferent to my battles, unmoved by my victory. And yet, for the first time in my life, I felt light. No more debt I didn't create. No more financial traps disguised as help. No more waking up to phone calls that made my stomach drop. I was free, but freedom had come at a cost. My parents' last words echoed in my head. "You may have won, but you've lost your family forever." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Maybe they were right. Maybe the family I had always wanted, the one that valued me as more than a resource, never really existed in the first place. And maybe that was okay? "All right, hold still." Jordan popped the cork on a bottle of champagne, sending a sharp pop through my apartment. "Jesus!" I laughed as she poured 2 glasses. "Trying to give me a heart attack?" She grinned. "No, I'm trying to celebrate you." I shook my head, accepting the glass she handed me. "You did it, Calla. You actually did it." I took a sip, letting the cool bubbles fizz against my tongue. For the first time in weeks, hell, years, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. Jordan raised her glass. "To new beginnings." I clinked mine against hers. To choosing myself. We drank, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next crisis. Later that night, I opened my laptop to check my emails, expecting nothing more than work updates and junk mail. But one subject line made my stomach drop. Mediation request. Whitmore family dispute. I hovered over it, hesitating before clicking. "Ms. Whitmore, your parents have expressed interest in mediation. If you would like to discuss a possible resolution, we are available to facilitate a meeting at your convenience." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the words. After everything, after the trial, the lies, the public humiliation, they still wanted to talk? My first instinct was to slam my laptop shut and pretend I never saw it. But a part of me, some stubborn, deeply buried part, wanted to know why. Did they regret anything? Did they finally see what they had done? Or was this just another way to manipulate me? I closed my eyes, letting the questions settle in my chest. And then, I made my choice. I shut the laptop. For now, I didn't need their answers. For now, I didn't need to know their why. For now, I was choosing peace. I stood, stretching, feeling the tension in my body finally begin to fade. I stepped out onto my balcony again, inhaling the crisp night air. And as I stared out at the city, I whispered the words I had been waiting my whole life to say. For the first time in my life, I'm finally free. There was a time when I thought family meant sacrifice, until I realized real love doesn't come with conditions. I spent years being used, manipulated, and cast aside when I stopped playing their game. But choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. And now, I'm free. Free to live on my own terms, to surround myself with love that doesn't demand a price. If my story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because we all deserve to choose ourselves.